The prophet is born. One day, while traveling north, one of the Arab tribes from Mecca met a hermit in the desert. Some of the men stopped to speak with him. Hermits were known to be wise, and the Arabs often asked their advice. The hermit asked where they had come from. When they replied that they were from Mecca, he told them that Allah would soon send a prophet, who would come from their people. They asked the name of this prophet, and the hermit answered that his name would be Muhammad and that he would guide them to a new way of life. Meanwhile in Mecca, Aminah, although saddened by the loss of her husband, felt especially well and strong as she awaited the birth of her baby. During this time she dreamt of many things. On one occasion it was as if a great light were shining out of her, and on another she heard a voice telling her that she would have a boy and that his name would be Muhammad. She never forgot that voice, but she told no one about it. On Monday, the 12th day of Rabi al-Awwal in the year of the elephant, Aminah gave birth to a son. Allah sends man many signs when one of his chosen prophets is born, and on that 12th day of Rabi al-Awwal in the year 570 AD, many such signs were seen. Some were seen by Jewish scholars who had read in their scriptures of a coming prophet. One of these learned men in Yathrib, for instance, saw a brilliant new star he had never seen before as he studied the heavens that night. He called the people around him and, pointing the star out to them, told them a prophet must have been born. That same night another Jew was passing by the meeting place of the leaders of Quraysh in Mecca. He asked them if a baby boy had just been born and told them that if it were true, this would be the prophet of the Arab nation. Aminah sent news of the birth to her father-in-law, al-Muttalib, who was sitting near the Kaaba at the time. He was very happy and began at once to think of a name for the boy. An ordinary name would not do. 6 days came and went and still he had not decided. But on the 7th day, as he lay asleep near the Kaaba, al-Muttalib dreamt that he should give the baby the unusual name of Muhammad, just as Aminah herself had dreamt. And the child was called Muhammad, which means, the praised one. When al-Muttalib told the leaders of Quraysh what he had named his grandson, many of them asked, "Why did you not choose the sort of name that is used by our people?" At once he replied, "I want him to be praised by Allah in the heavens and praised by men on earth." A time with Halima. Like many other women in Mecca, Aminah decided to send her son away from the city for his early years to the desert where it was more healthy. Women from the desert used to come to Mecca to collect the new babies, and they would then keep them until they developed into strong children, for which they were well paid by the parents. Among the women who traveled to Mecca to fetch a new baby at the time Aminah's son was born, was a Bedouin woman called Halima. With her was her husband and baby son. They had always been very poor, but this year things were harder than ever because there had been famine. The donkey that earned Halima on the journey was so weak from hunger that he often stumbled. Halima's own baby son cried all the time because his mother could not feed him properly. Even their she-camel did not give them one drop of milk. Halima did not know what to do. She thought to herself, "How can I possibly feed another baby when I haven't got enough milk even for my own son?" At last they reached Mecca. All the other women of the tribe to which Halima belonged, the Bani Sa'd, found a child to take back with them, but not Halima. The only baby left was Muhammad. Usually the father paid the wet nurse, but Muhammad's father was dead. So no one wanted to take him, even though he was from one of the noblest families of Quraysh. Halima did not want to take him either, but she did not want to be the only woman to go back to her tribe without a baby to bring up. She asked her husband whether she should take Muhammad or not. He advised her to do so, adding, "Perhaps Allah will bless us because of him." They started on the return journey, and as soon as Halima began to feed Muhammad, her milk suddenly increased and she had enough for him as well as her baby son. When they were back home, everything began to change. The land became green, and the date trees, one of their main sources of food, gave lots of fruit. Even the sheep and their old she-camel began to give plenty of milk. Halima and her husband knew that this good fortune had come because they had the new baby, Muhammad, whom they had come to love as if he were their own son. When Muhammad was 2 years old, Halima took him back to his mother. She pleaded with Aminah, however, to let her keep him for a little longer, and to her great joy the mother agreed. During his time with Halima's family in the desert, Muhammad played with her children and together they would take the sheep out to graze. At other times, however, Halima would often find him sitting alone. It is said that on one occasion, 2 angels came to Muhammad and washed his heart with snow. In this way Allah made his heart pure, for he intended Muhammad to be greater than any man ever born and to become the seal of the prophets. In the name of Allah the Beneficent, the Merciful, did we not expand thy breast for thee and ease thee of thy burden which weighed down thy back, and exalted thy fame? So truly with hardship comes ease, truly with hardship comes ease. So when thou art relieved, still toil and strive to please thy Lord. Quran 94 verse 1-8. When Halima finally took Muhammad back to Aminah, he was a healthy, strong boy. Later he would look back with joy on the time he had spent with Halima, and he always thought of himself as one of the Bani Sa'd. The orphan's childhood. Muhammad returned to live with his mother in Mecca when he was about 3 years old. 3 years later Aminah decided to take her son to visit his uncles in Yathrib. She told her maid, Baraka, to prepare everything they would need for the long journey, and then they joined one of the caravans going there. They stayed in Yathrib a month and Muhammad enjoyed the visit with his cousins. The climate there was very pleasant and he learned to swim and to fly a kite. On their way back to Mecca, however, Aminah became ill and died. She was buried in the village at al-Awwal not far from Yathrib. Muhammad returned sadly to Mecca with his mother's maid. He was now 6 years old and had lost both his father and mother. He was then adopted by his grandfather, Abdu al-Muttalib, who loved him dearly and kept him by his side at all times. It was the custom of Abdu al-Muttalib to sit on a blanket near the Kaaba. There he was always surrounded by people who had come to speak to him. No one was allowed to sit on the blanket with him, however, except his grandson Muhammad, which shows how close they were to each other. Many times, Abdu al-Muttalib was heard to say, "This boy will be very important one day." 2 years later Abdu al-Muttalib became ill and Muhammad stayed by him constantly. Abdu al-Muttalib told his son, Abu Talib, to adopt Muhammad after his death, which he did. Abu Talib had many children of his own, but Muhammad immediately became part of his family and the favorite child. The time came for Quraysh to prepare a caravan to go to Syria. Abu Talib was going with them and he took Muhammad along. It was Muhammad's first journey to the north. After days of travel, the caravan arrived at a place near Syria where the Romans used to come to trade with the Arabs. Near this marketplace lived a monk called Bahira. His cell had been used by generations of monks before him and contained ancient manuscripts. Bahira saw the caravan in the distance and was amazed to see that over it was a large white cloud. It was the only cloud in a clear blue sky and it appeared to be shading one of the travelers. The monk was even more surprised to see that the cloud seemed to follow the caravan but disappeared when the person it was shading sat down under a tree. Bahira knew from the scriptures that a prophet was expected to come after Jesus and it had been his wish to see this prophet before he died. Realizing that what he had just seen was a miracle, he began to think that his wish might, after all, come true. The monk sent an invitation to the Meccans to come and eat with him. The Arabs were surprised because they often passed by and Bahira had never invited them before. When the group was all together for the meal, the monk said, "Is this everyone?" "No," someone said, "a boy was left watching the camels." Bahira insisted that the boy should join them. The boy was Muhammad. When he arrived, Bahira said nothing, but watched him all through the meal. He noticed many things about his appearance which fitted the description in the old manuscripts. Later on he took him aside and asked Muhammad many questions. He soon found out how he felt about the idols in the Kaaba. When Bahira tried to make him swear by them, as the Arabs used to do, Muhammad said, "There is nothing in this world that I hate more." They talked together about Allah and about Muhammad's life and family. What was said made Bahira certain that this was indeed the prophet who would follow Jesus. Then the monk went to Abu Talib and asked him how he was related to Muhammad. Abu Talib told him that Muhammad was his son. Bahira replied that this could not be so because the boy was destined to grow up an orphan, and he ordered Abu Talib to watch over Muhammad with great care. There are many stories told about Muhammad's youth. Some tell of how he used to take the family's sheep to graze and was always kind to them. While they grazed, he would sit thinking about the mysteries of nature. Unlike those around him, he never worshipped the idols and never swore by them. He also wondered why people were always struggling for power and money, and this saddened him and made him feel lonely, but he kept his feelings to himself. He was a quiet, thoughtful boy, and rarely played with other boys of his age. On one occasion, however, Muhammad went with some of the boys to a wedding in Mecca. When he reached the house, he heard the sounds of music and dancing, but just as he was about to enter, he suddenly felt tired and, sitting down, fell asleep. He didn't wake up until late the next morning and thus missed the celebrations. In this way, Allah prevented him from doing anything foolish, for he was keeping Muhammad for something much more important.